So this is your Wall Street for Main Street 2018 midterm post-election analysis. So yesterday was pretty crazy. Today was pretty crazy with all the news stories with Jeff Sessions breaking immediately after. But the Democrats did not get their blue wave as they were hoping and praying for. There was no blue wave. I think there's an argument there wasn't even a blue puddle. If you really want to get a little raunchy, there was kind of like an underwater fart. So the Democrats, though, did gain control of the House of Representatives. I think they gained 23 seats. We'll see if it's more or less. But the Republicans, thanks in large part to President Trump and the efforts he put in to going after trying to get senators either elected or reelected in certain key states, he won a lot of those battles. President Obama, campaigning for a lot of people, he did not win those battles. So I think, unfortunately, there's still going to be gridlock in D.C. The American people in general, because they don't understand economics, they don't understand the debt problem here in the United States, they tend to prefer divided government. And in general, voters, because a lot of them are uneducated, tend to want to vote themselves more free stuff. And, that's why we have socialism that is so successful now. So, yes, the socialist candidates like Andrew Gillum in Florida, the governor running for Florida, and the governor running in Georgia, I forgot her name offhand, and Beto O'Rourke in Texas, they are far left candidates. So, yes, they didn't win this time, but people voted a lot for socialism, and it almost won. So that should make people very, very wary going forward, that the Bernie Sanders message, the younger generation that Bernie Sanders and other socialists and Marxist professors at universities has inspired, is resonating with a lot of people, young and old voters. So this is the new normal. Welcome to dystopia. But I think the key message here is that despite tens of millions of dollars that hardcore Democrat billionaires and globalists like George Soros and other technology billionaires were throwing into elections, that in spite of that, the blue wave didn't happen. And this is a problem with U.S. politics in general. So we're going to do a little bit of market analysis later. The Dow was up over 2% on the news today of what happened in the elections. Initially, it was down because the Dow was, I think a lot of market participants were worried about the blue wave, but the blue wave didn't happen. But on the news of the 2018 midterms and the markets kind of figuring that out, we had healthcare stocks had a rally because the Democrats won back the House. So market participants are guessing that there will be some version of Obamacare continuing, which means more parasite healthcare companies that are going to be overcharging the government for Medicare, Medicaid, etc. When I was an investment analyst researching all different types of stocks in 2013 and investing daily, we were covering some of the healthcare stocks. We started covering some of those right before I left a couple months. And, I was looking through the financial statements of some of those and their investor presentations of some of these smaller financial stocks. And they built, first of all, their accounting was very, very shady. I mean, those healthcare companies are parasites. And they built their entire business models on basically getting Medicare dollars, getting Medicaid dollars, and getting, Obamacare dollars and cost shifting and drastically overcharging. Anyone who blames just capitalism and the free markets for the problems in our healthcare system in the United States doesn't really understand the problem. Government has been drastically intervening in the healthcare and hospital sector for almost 100 years now. Really, since FDR put wage and price controls in, and one of the ways that employers could kind of give their employees like a boost for wages was giving them healthcare benefits. So that was kind of a way around, and that way has stuck kind of for a while. Although, there's not necessarily wage and price controls anymore, but FDR and Truman and those guys, they had hard wage and price controls if you're not familiar with financial history. Okay, so I got a little bit off tangent. We're going to do the stupid disclosure. Make sure it's called the stupid disclosure before we do any more analysis and commentary or answer listener questions at the end of the show. So I'm not a financial advisor. Anything I say on this live stream show, whether it's about politics or how the Republicans winning the Senate, gaining more seats, or the Democrats winning the House, or healthcare stocks, or anything like that, is my opinion and is for informational and educational purposes only. Like I said, I'm not a financial advisor. Do your own due diligence. Just because you listen to a guy who has almost 4 million views despite YouTube censorship does not mean you're going to make a lot of money trading stocks or anything like that. Okay? So we're done with the stupid disclaimer, and I want to thank my 67 or 68 Patreon account contributors. We had 4 of them cancel. I'm not sure why. I thought I was doing a good job, but it is what it is. YouTube's screwing me, and so I'll just focus on the content. That's really the only thing I could control. So Trump he worked his ass off. He did a good job campaigning, and look at the results. Okay, this is not what the Democrats wanted. The Democrats were hoping for at least 50, maybe 60 or 70 seats in the House, like a supermajority, where they could have way over 50%. They have over 50% now. I have the results up on Yahoo and also MSN. They're giving the Democrats 223 seats as of right now, 218 for the majority. They won 23 seats. But President Trump, what he was able to do, and he focused on this, and I think this was very intentional on his part, and it seems to have been mostly a success, was he focused on campaigning for senators. And so, and there's reasons for that, because Trump wanted to get more judges, and also because Trump wanted more approvals for his administration. So if you're not familiar with the U.S. government, you need Senate confirmations in order to get like new secretaries in your cabinet, things like that. Like a new attorney general, a new secretary of state, things like that. And certain judges, as you saw with Kavanaugh and all the crazy stuff that happened with Kavanaugh. I think if you look at the Democrats and what happened, I think only Joe Manchin survived. The other Democrats who were on the fence and voted no against Kavanaugh, they got booted out. But they were also, a lot of those guys also got caught up in the Project Veritas. James O'Keefe and the Project Veritas action team. Let me check my notes again. So Project Veritas action team, these undercover investigative journalists, had successes in Tennessee, Florida, North Dakota, Missouri, Arizona, Texas with Beto O'Rourke, and Indiana. So I would say that Project Veritas definitely influenced the marginal voter, the independent voter who was kind of on the fence. And I think, basically all the ones that Project Veritas shone a light on, the Democrats didn't win those. And that's in spite of tens of millions of dollars where George Soros and other rich, hardcore Democrat billionaires are throwing into elections from out of state. So tons and tons of money came into all these different elections in different states from out of state. A lot of it was from Soros, but there's other billionaires who wanted to influence stuff. And you know what? If you go to the mainstream media, all you hear about on the mainstream media is how much damage and bad the Koch brothers are, right? Well, the Koch brothers, as rich as they are, as successful as they are, they do spend money on lobbying. They have some stupid libertarian think tanks. They have the Cato Group, which is okay on some things. But they are freaking amateurs. They are freaking poor people. They do not know what they're doing compared to the apparatus that George Soros has. And you know what? The mainstream media won't talk about it. So you have Eastern European countries, you have Israel that have either warrants outstanding for George Soros or have issued, proclamations or made, long statements showing how Soros has done all these problems. And no one on the mainstream media, through probably either because they're scared of Soros or because Soros controls them, will bring up any of the problems that George Soros has caused in elections and with his Open Society program and, all this stuff. And there's even more stuff that George Soros did bad, and it's mentioned in the new Peter Schweizer book, Secrets of Empires. So it talks about how Obama manipulated certain industries with regulation, the stocks crashed, and then Soros's hedge funds came in and bought the shares for pennies, and then the regulations were lifted and the shares went back up and billions of dollars extra were made. I'm just doing the live stream late tonight, guys, because I wanted to get kind of my thoughts out there on the 2018 midterm elections, and it was a crazy last couple weeks leading up to the midterm elections. Very crazy. And then, Trump goes and kicks Jeff Sessions out. The QAnon people were claiming, who believe in QAnon, were claiming that Jeff Sessions has been doing his job and running interference for a long time. Well, Jeff Sessions seems to be very upset that he got fired kicking and screaming, and he had a undated resignation letter, so he knew it was coming. Meanwhile, it looks like this Mueller investigation, Rod Rosenstein is no longer in charge of it, so maybe we'll get some public. First of all, the information in the Mueller investigation, it should be released publicly. Release that stuff publicly. But the Democrats can still do a ton of damage, and this is why I have the title up there about gridlock. And the American people, whether they're aware of it or not, have voted for basically divided government and gridlock. Now, this is not as bad. Things could have been a lot worse for Trump, but because they have control of the Senate, there's the odds of impeachment are almost zero. The Democrats would be dumb to try anything now because the Republicans have so much control over the Senate. It just if the Democrats had gotten a lot more seats in the Senate, then maybe, but those are stopped. The Democrats are going to have to resist in other ways, and they can still do a lot of damage. And I'll bring up some of the examples. So some of the Democrats that we do not like Maxine Waters, she's very corrupt. Her and her husband were basically on the board of directors of a smaller bank in LA, and it was basically insolvent during the 2008 financial crisis. They, excuse me, sorry, little cold. We're gonna have people commenting about that, like, your microphone's broken. How dare you do a live stream when you're sick? Trying to give you guys some good information. So, Maxine Waters and her husband, extremely corrupt. They're rich in their South Central LA area in Congress, while all their district for, I think, over 20 years she's been in the House of Representatives, just either stays the same or gets poorer. Meanwhile, she has a gated mansion, and she's so, what's the right word? Divorced from reality, Maxine Waters. It's such a bad act. I don't know if she actually believes half the stuff she's saying, or if it's just an act, but she's delusional. Anyways, now, unfortunately, she's in control of the House Financial Services Committee, so she can do a lot of damage. And there's other people like Nadler, who's now in charge of the House Judiciary Committee, Elijah Cummings, I believe, out of Maryland. So all these key Democrats in the House who are in charge of these committees, they have subpoena power. So they're not going to be able to impeach Trump, but they are going to be able to be thorns in his side and cause a lot of problems. So Trump's not going to be able to get a lot of the stuff he wants passed. So the additional tax cut, he's going to have to do some crazy amounts of bargaining. If he wants to do the wall, it's going to have to be crazy amounts of bargaining. There's going to have to be crazy amounts of bargaining now. Well, I mean, Trump, he offered over 1.5 million or 2 million DACA people the path to citizenship, and the Democrats turned that down. So I don't know what Trump can offer them where they'd actually be willing to do a deal, because they wanted to use that political platform to run before these 2018 midterms. Remember, Trump offered them that deal and they turned it down. A lot of people actually thought it was a good deal, but the Democrats in Congress did not think it was a good deal. So the Democrats, back to my point here, the Democrats now running these committees in the House of Representatives, if you're not familiar with American government, they have subpoena power. So potentially, I don't know if this is going to actually happen or not, but the guy in the House Judiciary Committee and the other one for House Oversight, the Judiciary Committee seems one of the most radical. He has claimed that he's going to open up dozens and dozens of investigations. I've heard estimates of some of the different committees opening up over 50 investigations in the House, with, people being subpoenaed and witnesses and stuff. And I think things are going to get so ugly that Congress, the Democrats in Congress in the House of Representatives, are going to get his actual tax returns. And they're not supposed to do this, but I can almost guarantee you if Democrats in Congress get his tax returns, all of them, they will release all of them publicly. They will leak them. So then, Trump's going to have to try to, maybe prosecute some. This is the type of circus, the type of reality television show that we are still going to be involved in going forward, at least for another 2 years. We'll see if Trump actually wins the re-election. I think it's actually probably going to be easier now for Trump to win the re-election based on what happened with the midterms yesterday. It looks like it's going to be easier. Hey, Seth. Thanks for commenting. Yeah, I agree. It's going to get really ugly. Well, I mean, if you check Twitter, I mean, now it's so stupid that even if you give a legitimate criticism for, like, George Soros or other people, there's, like, a Twitter troll army that just come out of nowhere and start calling you all kinds of really nasty names. Someone called me a Nazi. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. The government of Israel and many other Eastern European governments have issued statements about problems that George Soros has done. Totally ridiculous. You know, the Democrat, not all Democrats are this bad, but some of the more radical Democrats, you know, anytime you disagree with them, you're racist, a sexist, a Nazi, you know, all this stuff. These names are bad. Things have to de-escalate. And unfortunately, if you saw what happened today with Jim Acosta at the White House, the CNN guy, the reporter, the journalist, I'm using air quotes, by the way. So he's neither a reporter nor a journalist because he's neither objective nor unbiased. It looked to me like Jim Acosta went on a bender last night when he realized the blue wave wasn't going to happen. So he got depressed and he started drinking more than usual. And he came into the White House like totally sauced. And he just went off on Trump like more than usual. But he lost his credentials today. And so CNN is trying to spin this like, oh, this is unprecedented. He didn't deserve it. It's just unbelievable. All the crazy stuff, the circus that we have. So I think James O'Keefe and Project Veritas deserve, and the undercover investigative journalists whose names are going unmentioned, they deserve an enormous amount of credit. Because the amount of money that the Democrats, the big Democrat donors, put into this election, into the midterms, they should have gotten those seats. They should have gotten those seats. But it was, you know, President Trump targeting select things, the Project Veritas, and unfortunately, you know, really there's so few conservative or libertarian, really good investigative journalists these days. Like you have Judicial Watch, which has gotten, they've had to sue the federal government, all these government agencies to get all these on declassified documents that are redacted. They shouldn't have to. The federal government agencies should release them on a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request, and instead Judicial Watch, if you follow them on YouTube and you follow like their podcasts and the stuff they put out, sometimes it takes them years of lawsuits. You know, waste of time and money in order to get a tiny amount of documents. And that's how they found out about Benghazi and Hillary Clinton and the email server. It was because they had to sue the State Department for years for the Benghazi emails. And then after a while, they got some emails. The State Department reluctantly handed over some emails. And they said, how come we don't see a single Hillary Clinton email? And the State Department said, oh, we don't store those emails. Those emails are privately stored. And the Judicial Watch people were like, what? And so that's how like everyone found out about the Hillary Clinton email server, was because Judicial Watch did all the work. So it's a really unbalanced equation. You have the mainstream media, you have all their resources, all their fake reporters, you know, willing to slander someone and do all this stuff. And then you have a handful of groups on the other side. Does that sound fair to you? Okay, let me check listener questions really quick. Scott, you wouldn't say uneducated, you would say brainwashed. Yeah, I would say there's a lot of people with 2 degrees or 3 degrees, with master's degrees and PhD degrees, who are very, very brainwashed. They are true believers in socialism. And socialism is a religion to them. Big government is a religion to them. They refuse to ignore reality. So they're the types of people that would say that what is happening in Venezuela is not socialism. What is happening in North Korea is not socialism. What happened in the Soviet Union and what happened in the satellite countries to the Soviet Union was not real socialism. So they would be the ones that would be deflecting and making excuses like that. Thanks, Paul. I'm glad you like the content so far. I'm not sure how long this show is going to be, so we're just going to... Some people are interested in the political stuff. The markets seem to really like the news from the midterms. So the dollar index, it set 96.12. The VIX is down. More importantly, the VIX is down a lot. So the VIX went from, I think, 26 last week or 27. It's down to 16 again, 16.36. So the VIX went down a lot. Counterpoint corner. Yes, socialism is on the rise. It's pervasive. Yep, it's global. Socialism, particularly in the West, in England, in Western Europe, in the United States, in South America, is rising. Although Bolsonaro in Brazil has been like the first defeat of socialism, I would say, in a while for South America. South America tends to... maybe I'll get my buddy Jose on, who escaped from Venezuela, and we'll talk about this. But the common misconception about Venezuela is that Venezuela was capitalist before Hugo Chavez, and it's just not true. So Venezuela had been getting more and more socialist, more and more totalitarian, more and more government taking control over the private sector economy, even before Chavez. And there will be economic opportunities in Venezuela, but you're going to have to wait. Venezuela has tons of agriculture, tons of mining, tons of oil resources. There needs to be rule of law. There needs to be private property rights. There needs to be a government that will respect investors. And then people will come in, and there will be opportunity for more jobs and more investment. And Venezuela will eventually rebound. But, we're nowhere near there, unfortunately. Things are getting worse in Venezuela before they get better. It's a really sad situation. Good point, Rich. Yeah, Canada. Well, Canada's turning into like Europe, with the amount of immigration and the social and the welfare programs, and it was already a high tax state, but the demographics of Canada have changed a lot. And Canada's economy is no longer based on resources. I think the banks in Canada have really gotten addicted to the housing price bubble in Canada, and also giving out all these consumer credit loans. So the banks in Canada, like Australia, the Australian and Canadian banks have not really had problems in the past. Australia, technically, I believe, has not had a recession for over 25 years, according to government statistics. And now, so the banks leverage to the hilt on like real estate prices and loans and things like that along real estate. And now those banks in Australia, are going to have dividend cuts, and there's going to be potential down the road. I don't know the exact timeline on this, but probably in less than 5 years, Australian banks are going to have to be restructured under bailouts. And the Canadian ones are not that much better. Let's just put it that way. The Australian ones, I would think, are in worse shape because of their proximity to China. And the housing bubbles in Canada are really only in Vancouver. Vancouver's the largest one, and then Toronto is the second largest. But I've heard anecdotal evidence that Chinese money from all this money laundered stuff that Kyle Bass and Miles Kwok and Steve Bannon and I discussed on my live stream last week, that some of this laundered money out of China from their QE programs, their tens of trillions of dollars in the last 10 years, it's even gotten into like Montreal and Quebec and other cities in Canada, although nowhere near as much as Vancouver. Seth, do you think the Fed will raise rates until the collapse of the stock market? Well, it seems that they're on that path. Now, I don't know if they're going to raise rates in December or not. But as long as the stock market shows some strength, I think Powell wants to continue to raise rates to give himself more ammunition for the next crisis. Unfortunately, though, the more he raises rates, the more likely in the real economy, because there's so much credit, there's so much leverage, everything's over leveraged, that he will eventually break something. So the Fed's in a catch-22. Experts like Grant Williams and other people I've interviewed over the years have said this as well, that the Fed is basically trapped. So they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. I mean, honestly, betting on rate hikes and things like that, it doesn't really matter. What matters is the dollar, because the most likely economic landmines are still emerging markets, corporate bonds, and European banks and European governments right now. China's also in some trouble. There's people that think that China could collapse rapidly, but China, I think, just announced a new stimulus program. So it's like they're trying to intentionally hyperinflate their currency. As long as there's jobs, right? So as long as the Chinese people have jobs and they can send people out of the country for FDR or FDR make work jobs programs like in the Great Depression in 1929 or Keynesian ditch digging programs, as long as there's the ability for the China to continue to print money and create credit and create jobs programs, and people will take the RMB inside China at least. I think a lot of people outside China don't want the RMB. Okay, the percentage of people using RMB for reserves and other things is very, very low, and that's despite China massively increasing their money supply. So if the RMB was being internationalized and more popular, that percentage of RMB transactions and people holding RMB as reserves would go a lot higher. And that's just not the case. Texas, counterpoint corner. Texas Senate race was too close for comfort. Well, that's because Beto O'Rourke, so much money. Over $60 million came into Texas for that election. That's an insane amount of money. An insane amount of money for a congressional election, for a Senate election, to help Beto O'Rourke. So, of course, he was going to make it closer than it probably should have been with that much extra money, that much extra help. James Hernandez, recent article that Bank of England will not release $550 million of gold bullion to Venezuela for fear Maduro will sell the gold and pocket the cash. Or maybe they don't have the gold. Or maybe they need to wait 6 months or a year for the gold. The LBMA is supposed to release accurate data at the end of the month. For the first time, I think ever, the LBMA will be releasing some type of data publicly on November 20th. That will be the first time. But yeah, if all this, and this is the problem with money in politics. Sorry, got switched back and forth. I just remembered my train of thought. So if they're going to allow this type of money being spent into politics, then the Democrats who have more money, the stereotype is that Republicans are really rich now. But if you look at the demographics of a lot of Republicans, that's changed. So there's a lot more rich Democrats now. There's a lot more rich globalists. Most of the rich people in the United States are in like New York, Wall Street area, Hollywood, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Silicon Valley, and San Francisco. And with Beto O'Rourke, what has happened is that a lot of Californians who ruined California, right, with high taxes, lots of rules, lots of regulations. They elected crazy politicians, basically Bernie Sanders or worse, with crazy ideas and rules and regulations and stuff, right? So California now has basically turned into a European country like Italy or Greece. Jim Poplava, Financial Sense, smart guy, respect him a lot. He tried to compare California to the Rust Belt in the Midwest, and California, that's not a good comparison. The better comparison of what has happened to California is Italy or Greece. Okay? Far better. Because there's always going to be people who want to move to the beautiful beaches and warm weather of California. There's always going to be tourists who want to go to California to either go to San Diego and La Jolla or go to Disneyland, which is where I grew up, about 20 minutes from Disneyland. Hey, inflation is so bad, and Disney has hiked the price on going to Disneyland so much that when I was a kid, a teenager, this is crazy inflation story, anecdotal. So it was $120 for an annual pass for a year for a kid or an adult to go to Disneyland when I was like a teenager. When I was a little kid and a teenager. $120 per year. And so you could go back then to Disneyland as much as you wanted for that much money. And my mom loved that stuff, and she used to drag me when I was a little kid to Disneyland way too much. But, nowadays, inflation is so high that I think $120 per person, I don't even know if you can get one ticket to go into either Disneyland or Disney World or any of those types of parks now. I think it's like over $100, and I think if you want to go to different parks on the same day, I think it's like a combo ticket. It's like $200 or $300, and then they upsell you if you want to cut, and you don't get that much for paying like the sky high admission prices now. So if you still have to wait in like 2 or 3 hour lines on the attractions, so if you want to be upsold and you want to wait like 5 minutes or no wait on some of these roller coasters at the parks, you then pay like double the price or triple the price, sometimes even higher. Yeah, California it's going to get worse, Rich. California's going to get worse before it gets better. If you are a libertarian, I don't know how libertarians can stay in California. Maybe they have a lot of money and they don't care. But if you're a small business owner, or you're barely getting by financially, or you're trying to like build something up for yourself, I don't know how you could do it in California if you're a Republican, a conservative, or a libertarian, because you're being targeted. You're being targeted by the state of California, too, for extra taxes. So, I mean, everything's layered on with rules, regulations, and taxes. And I got a little off tangent there with California stories, but back to my point here. So, a lot of these rich Silicon Valley hypocrite a-holes, they have made their money in California, and now that the taxes and rules and regulations are too high in California, guess what? They've ruined California. Now they're going to Texas. Now they're going to ruin Texas. In a generation or two, maybe faster, depending upon how much money and how many people go. So you have tons of California people who have moved to Colorado, moved to Nevada, moved to Texas. And you know what? The voting trends that happened in California the last couple decades are going to be happening in those states. And you have the same concept with people from like New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Michigan, who are moving down to more southern states that have lower taxes, like North and South Carolina, Georgia. I already mentioned Texas. So the people who ruined those states with, voting for high taxes and rules and regulations and voted in crazy politicians, corrupt ones, they cannot afford, either they don't want to live in those states anymore. Maybe it's too cold, probably too expensive from what I'm hearing from anecdotal stories about property tax hikes. And so they've ruined those states, and now they're moving down to other states that have lower taxes, lower rules, lower regulations, and they're going to, eventually over time, they're going to vote in the same politicians that ruined those other states. And the cycle will repeat. I wish I was wrong about this, but, we've just seen this. The other very expensive, high roll, high tax state is New Jersey, besides New York. And so the funny thing is, more than 50 years ago, New Jersey was actually a really low tax, low regulation state. So a bunch of New Yorkers moved from New York to New Jersey to escape high taxes, high rules, high regulations. And look at New Jersey now. I mean, New Jersey is like one of the worst. I've heard from people who own businesses and also are married that their tax attorneys and tax accountants tell them don't die in New Jersey if you own a business or assets, and don't get divorced in New Jersey. Yeah, so these high tax intervention socialist ideals are being spread by people who were initially in certain states and they're moving to other states. This is the cycle that we see. Professor Curtis is Doc of the Bay. Where do you go from Oakland? Oh, boy. Well, it would depend what skills you have, where you could find more work, or if you own your own online business or something like that. If you want to stay in the United States, I mean, there's certain parts of Florida that are okay, certain parts of Texas, certain parts of Arizona. There's no perfect situation, man. Because what I just described, the people who voted for high taxes, high rules, high regulations, for years of voting for this and ruining financially, a lot of these states are leaving those states. So they're thinking the same thing that you are, and that's why we're seeing the voting patterns change. You're seeing the California voting pattern spread to states like Arizona and Nevada and Colorado and Texas. It's only a matter of time before, this increases more. So ideally, Professor Curtis, what I would do is, I don't know if you have a day job or not or own your own business, but on the side, you need to get a side hustle and start building out online income. So if you have to move, you can move somewhere else and you can make money online. You need money coming in online. And then you can move, because we don't know what the rules changes are going to be from politicians or whatnot. But the Democrats, so they're talking Democrat heads on TV, the Democrat experts, that, by the way, were predicting a blue wave. But they're saying now that the Democrats won the House, the Democrats should avoid, these obstructionist policies and impeachment stuff, and the Democrats should focus on legislating. So if they do focus on that, you would probably see a further bump in healthcare stocks. And like I said, though, the fundamentals of the healthcare stocks are not really good. There's a big accounting problems in a lot of these healthcare stocks. The healthcare industry is so corrupt that I'm not sure if you're familiar with how a hospital actually gets money. So hospitals, a lot of hospitals actually lose a lot of money, and then they get a rebate back from the federal government, and that's how they declare a profit. Most people aren't aware of this. So even though the hospital is drastically overcharging you for a procedure or medication, and your insurance company is denying it and telling you have to pay more out of pocket, blah, 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 or they're cost shifting. By the way, with Obamacare, they denied that cost shifting would still occur, and there was tons of evidence it was. But the accounting problems are massive, and it's because these healthcare companies, hospitals, large healthcare companies, health insurance companies, are basically parasites of the federal government. And it's been this way. Do your research. You can go and look this up. Mises Institute has videos on this. There's lots of articles on this for almost 100 years. So President FDR put wage and price controls in during the Great Depression in 1929. And as part of the way for employers to pay their employees more without... First of all, if you're not familiar with what happened during the Great Depression in 1929 with wage and price controls, if you tried to raise the prices or you tried to pay your employees more, so if you were a good business owner and you tried to reward your employees, or you tried to raise the prices because the market that you were in, the demand said that you could raise the prices, you were risking going to prison. Okay, there's actual trials, and I think it went to the Supreme Court, and FDR lost. There was some good books about this. One of them is by Amity Shlaes. I read it earlier this year. It's called The Forgotten Man. So if you're interested about learning what really happened during the Great Depression in 1929 and the subsequent years prior to World War II, that's a good book. Murray Rothbard also wrote an extensive book about the Great Depression. And so if you raised your prices even a little bit because your market said you could when there was wage and price controls. So there was a dry cleaner, I think, who raised his price a nickel. I want to say it was a nickel. And then there was a chicken guy who raised his price a nickel. And FDR, put his best lawyers to go after these guys and try to put them in prison for, over 10 years. It's easier said than done, Curtis, to build an online business. So you got to figure out what your niche is. Maybe you have to find a good partner who has experience or capital or skills that would complement yours. Trying to do it all by yourself is very, very hard. Trust me on this. Even trying to do it with partners is hard, especially when the partners don't do what they say or don't have the skills. Yeah, so wage and price controls, the government has been okay, I remember my train of thought now. I had a little brain fart temporarily. So the employers, in order to get around these wage and price controls that FDR and his other central planning bureaucrats and socialists had installed during and after the Great Depression in 1929, before World War II, they started paying their I'm using air quotes, paying their employees more by giving them healthcare benefits. So they couldn't raise the employees' wage because there were wage and price controls, but the employees were given healthcare benefits instead of a wage increase. And so this is stuck, and this is how the healthcare industry that was government-backed, that was government-regulated, increased more and more and more. And it started there, and it's only gotten worse in the last 80-plus years. Curtis, I don't know what an urban treasure hunter is. You could perhaps tell me. Good night, Seth. Thanks for joining the live stream temporarily. Okay, so let me just check my notes here. I think I got most of the stuff. Main summary here: no blue wave, blue puddle. If you want to be raunchy, it was an underwater fart bubble by the Democrats. They will do a lot of potential damage in the House, though. They can open up a boatload of investigations against Trump that, with subpoena power, they can cause a lot of problems. They may even, in the near future, get hands on all President Trump's personal taxes and just leak them. And then President Trump is going to have a huge fit, and he's going to potentially want to have the FBI and the DOJ file charges. Another mess coming. In fact, I would put the probability of that pretty high. We need to get money out of politics. I'm not sure the exact right answer. But, the Koch brothers, George Soros, other rich billionaires, they can afford to throw tens of millions of dollars at a local election that comes in from out of state and drastically skew things. And there are legitimate problems with voter fraud. Project Veritas has documented a good amount of this. There's others. There was a case in Texas that I don't think was Project Veritas. It was someone else a couple weeks ago prior to the midterms. So it is a real problem. But socialism, it didn't win in the United States with the three major candidates that were the most socialists. The governor of Georgia, Stephanie Abrams, the potential governor of Florida, Andrew Gillum, who's corrupt, who is still under investigation. If he would have won the governorship of Florida, would he have just canceled his own corruption investigations? Yeah, I don't know about that one. And then Beto O'Rourke, who was far left, who actually raised the most money. So you have rich Silicon Valley guys who made a lot of money off capitalism, but hate capitalism, actually donated the most money to him. I guess because they're moving to Texas from California. And then you have corrupt Senator Bob Menendez, who hung jury in a corruption trial, and it came out in his trial that he's a pedophile, that he likes 16-year-old prostitutes, and he still won re-election in New Jersey. Facepalm. I just did a facepalm. I don't know if you heard that bump that I just did was my forehead. My palm hitting my forehead. Probably not a good idea since I have glasses on, but I was just shaking my head at that. I was like, New Jersey, come on, man. I can't believe you did that. Like, I know he's a Democrat, and I know y'all are loyal, but that was bad. Find another candidate, please. One that doesn't do, ab scam type felonies, and then also, addicted to 16-year-old prostitutes. Please. Find someone a little better. Okay, well, I'm going to check listener questions. I think I've got pretty much everything I wanted to cover. I am pretty tired, though, so maybe I forgot a couple things. I have some notes here, too. Maxine Waters, though, she was brought up on ethics violations for her and her husband. They had a small bank in California, and it basically got wiped out during the 2008 financial crisis. And remember, the Fed was only bailing out, big banks. So if you had a small bank, you didn't have access to the capital like the big banks were with the TARP programs and the bailouts and all that stuff. And Maxine Waters was able to weasel her way because her and her husband had over $10 million worth of investments into this bank. And they got bailouts to save their investments and assets. And so no one talks about this on the mainstream media. You get called a conspiracy theorist if you bring this up. But it's all out there. Do your own due diligence about how corrupt she is. If this country, the United States, had rule of law and there was actually ethical people in the Department of Justice and FBI and stuff like that, I think Maxine Waters probably should have went to, or maybe even her husband probably should have went to prison for that in 2008. Look up the case, do your own due diligence, and see what happened. But now she's going to be in charge of a lot of finances now. And she could open up her own investigations now into Trump. So it's going to be crazy. The Democrats are unhinged. A lot of Democrat friends that I've seen on Facebook are really upset that the blue wave did not happen. It's not because they didn't try. I mean, they tried voter fraud. They threw tens of millions of dollars at a lot of these different elections, and it still didn't work. So I think a lot of credit, like I said, has to be given to President Trump because he picked the right elections to go campaign for the last couple weeks. He worked his butt off. I mean, a lot of other candidates would. Obama campaigned and it failed, and then a lot of credit is deserved to Judicial Watch and also Project Veritas. And it's going to be reality television until Trump is gone. It's going to be every day is going to be like this. God knows what is coming next. God knows what's coming next. I mean, it sounds like Donald Trump Jr. may still be indicted, but because now that Jeff Sessions is gone and Rod Rosenstein is no longer overseeing the Mueller investigation, that I don't think that the indictments are going to go very far. But, I mean, that was going to be It just when you think things can't get crazier, it just gets crazier. Trump has bought that. He's totally unhinged the mainstream media. I mean, I'm tired of things escalating. The other thing about the elections was the voter basis. So there was actually a really strong turnout. But I saw some analysis last night from a really good investigative reporter. I think her name's Judy Miller, but she's biased, so she's Democrat. But she did make a good point about this on Fox News. And she said that both parties had really strong voter turnout yesterday, but she said that things are becoming more polarized and more divisive. So unfortunately, I think things are going to get worse before they get better. And, I hope I'm wrong about this, but it looks like violence is still escalating. Look what just happened with Tucker Carlson today. I mean, the man, First Amendment free speech, right? You have Antifa now outside of his house, and he's for little kids. So I don't know if they were outside of his house while he was recording his television show today, but I just saw a video of this online that there's groups of Antifa outside this man's house with his wife and his kids. So he's either going to have to move or he's going to have to hire like private security forces now. Just because he has a TV show on Fox News and he triggers people, certain types of people, and says things that certain people don't like. The new normal sucks, man. It's not fair. It's not right. And, things are escalating. So I don't have a lot of market analysis for the rest of this little live stream. I will answer a couple more listener questions and I'm going to go. We're going to end this early because I have a really good special guest in the next couple days, I think on Friday, and you're going to really like it. It's going to be a topic I haven't really touched on before, and you might even learn some really nice things there to do more research for investments or trading. Scott, yeah, Minnesota's a total disaster. I don't want to go into it too much, but Laura Loomer, boots on the ground, the stuff she's bringing up. Look what Keith Ellison, I mean, there's tons of evidence that he beat his ex-girlfriend, like videos and corroborating evidence and all that, and the mainstream media is just overlooking it because he's a prominent Democrat. It's horrible. He should have resigned, and he should be looking... dropped out of the election, and he should be looking at criminal charges, and he probably won't get any of those. But I guess with the U.S. court system with civil suits, his ex-girlfriend will sue him, but that's not going to be what the justice that she wants. But remember, the U.S. is a banana republic with no rule of law and largest global military in history, and lots of advanced weaponry and lots of nukes. So welcome to dystopia, right? Okay, I'm looking at listener comments and questions. I'll do a couple of those and then I'm turning the show off. I'm getting kind of tired here, and I have a little cold, so my voice is kind of going in and out. I'm going to get comments on this like, why do you bother doing a live stream show when you don't feel well? Or your microphone's broken? Paul Rogers, socialism seems to rise on economic unrest, therefore making the situation worse. No wonder massive unemployment is on the way. Well, the situation that all these major economies, there's more inflation than there's more taxes. And these economies, whether it's China, Europe, the United Kingdom, the US, are all lying about it with their economic data. So, yes, in the US, more jobs may be created, but number one, later the GDP numbers are seasonally adjusted or revised downwards. This has been this way for 10 years. The GDP is not calculating a real inflation rate. All these GDP growth that Trump and others are touting and Republicans are touting, it's all nominal GDP growth. Back to jobs, though. So I think the economy in the U.S. is creating jobs. However, it's not really creating full-time jobs. It's creating a lot of part-time jobs. And I haven't seen any evidence that the part-time jobs have been stopped counting as full-time jobs. So the people in the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Federal Reserve, these other PhD economists making over $65,000 a year here in Washington, D.C. and New York City, grossly overpaid. Some of them are making actually a couple $100,000 a year. I think at the Federal Reserve alone, I think they have thousands of PhD economists making over $65,000 a year, some of them making well over $100,000 a year. to come up with more economic propaganda and rejigger this formula or that formula, tweak this, tweak that to make certain numbers look like this way or that way, whatever the president or whoever wants them to look like. So I think the economy, because the last jobs number a couple months ago, it was saying how many financial jobs were being created. And as you guys know, I know a lot of people in the financial industry, and a lot of people in the financial industry are getting fired. Okay, things are getting automated with high-frequency trading programs. A lot of money managers are getting fired because money is going into these passive ETFs, passive investing. So for supposedly, and investment banks are firing tens of thousands. Some of them are firing tens of thousands of people. So for finance to be creating all these jobs, it's kind of a head-scratcher to me. Maybe they're hiring these 22 to 26-year-old pretty girls to go work in investment banks. I actually just saw a really, really pretty 25-year-old brunette on the dating app here in Washington, D.C. Goldman Sachs hired her. And I think she only had an undergraduate degree. I swipe right, but I don't think I'm her type. Let me put it that way. I think she's probably going to find like a 45-year-old with a Ferrari and a NetJets card. It said she was only looking for something casual anyway. You're welcome, Jim, and thanks for being a Patreon supporter. I appreciate it. Hey, Robert. Yeah, I was a little early on uranium. But I thought the market would eventually bottom. I think we put out, when Mo was still here, I think in January 2017, we did some more uranium videos showing that the uranium market was close to bottoming. And there's people in the comment section. You can go and look at this in the archives of the channel. There was people commenting that we got that wrong. We don't know what we're talking about. Admit you were wrong about uranium. And I was like, eventually it's going to have to turn. They're like, doesn't matter. You're wrong, blah, blah, blah. And so, the market did turn. Okay. It's better to be a little bit early, as long as you don't use leverage. Again, not financial advice. As long as you don't use leverage. So if you were patient and you accumulated a little bit of shares of Cameco, CCJ here, a little bit of shares of Cameco here, $6, $7, and you accumulate a little bit over time, look, you've done very well for yourself. So no one gets the timing perfectly, okay? There's trading services out there. There's paid investment newsletters. There's paid investment newsletter writers that claim they get the timing perfectly, like 70, 80, 90% of the time. And they show you some of their winning trades. And I could tell you that most of them, if you went through their newsletters, it would not be the true. And I've worked in the newsletter business. I had a day job at a newsletter company that had over $5 million a year in sales. Actually, at one point, they had over $40 million in sales decades ago, but the company was so mismanaged by the ownership group that bought it that the sales went from $40 million a year in the 1970s, and it was much larger than Agora Financial, and it crashed. The sales crashed at the company down to around $5 or $6 million a year, and the company was running at a loss. And then the president of the owner of the company brought in his son as president. Actually, I shouldn't go into too many details, but they're not exactly giving me job references. Let's just put it that way. Okay, guys. Well, I'm getting tired right now, so we'll shut down the show. And if you have any more questions or comments you want answered, you can just put them in the comment section of the video after the live stream show is over. Thanks for your time. Thanks for watching. And I hope you liked this little political analysis and wrap. But it's been an interesting, basically 24 hours. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to have reality television with politics. The Dow did seem to like what happened with the elections, but I think, what's coming in the next 12 to 18 months, nothing has changed with the budget deficits, with the interest rate hikes that the Fed is planning. At some point, something will break. So the Treasury Department will need to raise another $1.2 trillion because of all these asset sales that the Federal Reserve is doing in about 12 months or so. And it's going to get ugly. So I don't know who the buyers are going to be for that Treasury Department. Maybe it's for the Treasury sales. Maybe it's pension funds. Maybe they force retirement money into there. Maybe it's one of the plunge protection teams. Maybe it's the Exchange Stabilization Fund. Doesn't sound like foreigners have an enormous appetite for a lot more treasuries. But we can discuss that on another live stream show. I'm tired. It's after 11 p.m. Eastern. And everyone have a good night.